Hi everyone, it's Agnieszka Murdoch from 5 Minute Language. Welcome to my channel. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already and give this video a thumbs up. I really appreciate it. I recently went over 20,000 subscribers on my channel, which is amazing, and I just want to say thank you so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing to my channel. It really means a lot to me. It's great to have this community and I feel really lucky that I can share my knowledge with you guys and help you learn English and learn other foreign languages as well. So today's video is all about how to go from intermediate to advanced in English. But before we tackle this question, it's good to kind of understand what it means to go from intermediate to advanced. What actually changes when you do that? So going from intermediate to advanced is not about how many words you know in English. Because if you want to be fluent in a language, if you want to be considered an advanced learner, you don't need to know all the vocabulary that exists in English. In fact, you can have quite limited vocabulary, but you can express yourself naturally, idiomatically, and that will allow you to be kind of classified as an advanced learner. Being advanced in English also doesn't mean being able to speak quickly, because there are learners who are sometimes at much lower levels, such as pre-intermediate levels, and they can speak very quickly, they can speak very fast when they speak English. But that doesn't mean that they're actually talking correctly. Some learners basically are able to speak more quickly, they speak before they think, but it doesn't mean that they're actually following the rules. So being advanced in English doesn't mean that you can speak quickly necessarily. It's also not about how much you can understand, because some people just can understand very well from very early stages of learning English, and then other people are not as good at understanding, but they can be advanced because they can communicate, they can speak fluently, they can read anything. And so basically being advanced in English doesn't necessarily mean that you can listen and you can understand everything. So what is it actually about? So I think being advanced and moving from intermediate to advanced in English is all about two things. So the first thing is being able to sound natural, which means being able to use words in the right context, in the right sort of combinations. And it's also about being able to understand nuance. So being able to distinguish, for example, when somebody who's talking is being sarcastic, or if they're being rude, or if they're being funny. Being able to understand those nuances is something that distinguishes an advanced learner from an intermediate learner. So two things: being able to speak naturally and being able to understand nuance. So we're going to go into a few different techniques and tips that I've got for you that will enable you to do those two things. Are you ready? Let's get started. So the first thing I mentioned is sounding natural. And so basically when you speak English, you need to know when to use particular words. So you will be learning lots of different advanced vocabulary if you want to go from intermediate to advanced, but you need to know in which context it's appropriate to use each of these words. And to be able to do that, you need to learn idioms and you need to learn collocations. So collocations are basically combinations of words that always go together. So for example, if you talk about a significant majority, that is a collocation. A significant majority. For example, a significant majority of people believe that carrot is a healthy vegetable. So you need to be able to match those words together. That's why learning collocations is a useful thing to do. And how you can do that is you can get a collocations dictionary, and every time you learn a new word, look it up in the collocations dictionary and see what kind of words this word goes with. So it will give you examples of different prepositions, different adverbs, adjectives, verbs that word will go with. And you can write down those examples and make sure that you revise them, that you memorize them, and that you try to come up with your own examples as well. Also, what helps with learning collocations is reading and also looking up lots of examples of sentences with any word that you're learning. So when you're learning vocabulary, it's not just about learning the definition of the words that you're trying to memorize. It's all about seeing those words in context, looking up examples of sentences that contain those words, and also looking at collocations and trying to kind of absorb all of that. And that's the difference between intermediate learners and advanced learners in English. Intermediate learners will often just know the translation of a word, whereas an advanced learner will be able to tell you in what context that word can be used correctly, and they will be able to sound naturally when they use that word in a sentence. So the second thing I mentioned was idioms. Idioms are basically expressions that exist in English. So for example, the expression "pardon my French" is an idiom. It's something that you use when you want to apologize for bad language. And as an advanced learner, you need to be aware of those idioms, but you also need to kind of use them in conversations if you want to sound fluent. So like I said, reading really helps with this as well. Like I said, every time you look up those words, you need to do the work, you need to look up the examples, the definitions, but also just reading, doing lots and lots of reading, because that will allow you to see those words in context, in kind of real writing, and it will really help you to progress to advanced. Okay, the next thing I mentioned when it comes to advanced learners is that they can understand nuance. They can understand very kind of tiny differences between the meaning of different words. They can understand things like tone. And one thing that allows them to do that is knowing a lot of synonyms. So synonyms are basically, if you don't know, words that mean the same thing or something very similar. Obviously, they often don't mean exactly the same thing. So that's why learning synonyms is such an important thing, because when you take two different words that are sort of 99% similar to each other, you do need to understand the difference, the 1% difference that kind of makes them different from each other. And being able to understand that will allow you to use those words correctly, but also to understand nuance, to understand the true meaning of what somebody is saying when they're speaking English. So be intentional about learning synonyms, because often learning synonyms is just something that sort of happens as a side effect when you're learning English, but you can make it intentional. So you can, for example, say you're going to learn the synonyms of 5 different words each week, or commit to something similar that will basically build synonym learning into your weekly schedule for learning English. Another thing that you can do when you want to make sure that you understand nuance is learning adjectives and adverbs. So obviously adjectives and adverbs are used to describe how things are. So adjectives describe nouns and adverbs can describe verbs. And basically those words kind of provide you with additional context and additional information about something. So if somebody's talking about an angry dog, they're not just talking about any dog, they're talking about a very specific behavior in a dog. So if you learn lots of adjectives and adverbs, you will be able to understand better all the kind of context, all the additional information about what somebody is saying. So I definitely recommend that you do that you devote a lot of time intentionally to learn adjectives and adverbs as well. Okay, the next thing is tone and intonation. So doing a lot of listening practice will help you understand that there are different tones that can be used in English. And by tone, I mean, somebody is being funny, or somebody's being angry, or somebody is being sarcastic. And when you listen to English more and more, you will notice that people use different tones in different situations. So watching things like interviews with celebrities or politicians or maybe vlogs will allow you to do that. So I definitely recommend YouTube for that, because there's a lot of content where you can really spot the differences between different tones. And obviously intonation is maybe less important when it comes to understanding, but it's very important when it comes to speaking. If you want to express yourself correctly, if you want to emphasize the right things, then make sure that you practice intonation. And one way to do that is something that I already explained in one of my videos. You can repeat after a native speaker without using the actual words. You can just use a syllable such as me, 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 and just repeat the intonation of the sentence rather than actually repeating the words. And that will help you just focus on the intonation and practice that as opposed to practicing speaking, if you know what I mean. Okay, so these are the main two things. Obviously, when you're trying to get from intermediate to advanced in English, you will need to learn a lot of vocabulary, you will need to learn a lot of grammar, and you will need to practice listening, speaking, and writing and reading at the same time. So you need to do all of these things, but I definitely recommend these two kind of techniques that I've just mentioned, and also it's something that you should be doing, you know, at any stage of your learning, even if you're not trying to go from intermediate to advanced, but you're trying to go from pre-intermediate to intermediate. It's definitely something that will help you make progress more quickly. So like I said, make sure you subscribe to my channel, and I will have more videos for English learners in the future, so stay tuned, and I'll see you next time. Bye!